Miranda Reichs, the Rapid Novel Blueprint has been born. Really, this is the behind the scenes of so much of what it takes to write great fiction. And today, I would love to talk about writing for genre. So I'd love for you to start us out. How do you choose your genre and how do you get excited about genre writing?
Okay, so anybody that knows my writing knows that I write psychological thrillers. So I'm very, very focused. That's all I write, sort of all I write. Because obviously we've just written this craft book together.
Which is all about genre
So
fiction. Yeah.
yeah, yes. So how did I choose what genre I wanted to write in? Well, actually, it was really easy. It's what I like to read. So I read loads and loads, hundreds and hundreds of psychological thrillers. And I, when someone asks me what should I write about, it's got to be your passion. It has to be what you like to read. Otherwise, it's just not going to come naturally. So that's very simple advice there.
Yes, exactly. And as a coach, I can really hear that because I help people write a lot of different genres. And so I'm always like reading across the spectrum, fantasy books, thriller books, romance books. And one thing that when you're choosing your genre, that is absolutely the best advice. As you gobble down all of these books, there are going to be books that draw you in. Maybe you're loving romance. And then as soon as you get into romance, what is really fun now is that there are even more detailed genres. People are talking about romantasy with all of the fantasy books that have a central romance. There is all of these genres of paranormal fiction now. There's paranormal romance, ghosty romance. There's paranormal thrillers, thrillers with ghosts in them. And so that's also really fun. So, Miranda, you couldn't say it better. You have to write what you love. If you don't love it, it's going to be too hard and it's going to come off as fake. And so really read the spectrum, get into the little niches. If you think you like romance, start to think, do I like really steamy romance or do I like really Hallmark type romance, which has, very defined edges where you can't do a lot of certain steamy things in that kind of romance. Start to get in and really start to notice the patterns that you like in a particular genre, which brings us to genre conventions. How do you feel about genre conventions?
Well, just before we talk about genre conventions, in case you're not sure about what genre you really love, you can actually, there's something, quite a little simple trick. You can just go onto Amazon and have a look at all the categories. And the more you plug down into these categories, they break them down into, more and more, as you were talking about, paranormal romance, or I mean even more than that, cowboy paranormal romance. So you can
Exactly.
have it, go onto Amazon, have a look at those categories, and just have a look at some of the books in those categories, and I just find that super helpful.
Yes,
um
I
so going
can.
on to your question about about conventions, so I call them, well, I don't call them conventions, I call it more kind of like, you have to hit certain plot points. It's kind of a bit of a trope, but not in a negative way. So every single genre and subgenre, they have certain expectations within the book that the reader's going to expect. So for instance, if I write a psychological thriller and it's full of romance and it hasn't got any suspense in it, and there aren't any twists, then my readers are going to be really unhappy and they're not going to come back for more. So within every genre, there are certain things that you have to do because it's what the reader is expecting. Obviously, I know thriller's the best, so that's the easiest for me to talk about. And generally, we split the book into 3 acts plus a midpoint. So things happen at the end of each act. So you have something dramatic that's going to happen at the end of Act One. You have something quite sort of jaw-dropping at the midpoint, and then you have something dramatic that's going to happen again on the turn from Act 2 to Act 3. And then right at the beginning, you will have an inciting incident. And to be honest, I think that happens in every single genre. That's not at all unique to thrillers. And that basically means you start off in the normal life of your protagonist, and then very soon at the beginning of the book, something happens to trigger this journey that your protagonist is going to go on. So to me, that's really these certain things that have to happen, particularly within a thriller. Every chapter needs to have like a little bit of suspense at the end of it. So you'll find that some of the best thrillers, at the end of a chapter, it's like, oh, what's going to happen next? And that's really important because you're creating emotion, and with every genre, every single genre, you are creating a different type of emotion. Romance, it's love, it's passion, it depends how much spice there is in there. For thrillers, you want the heart pounding, you want that super fast page turning. You need to make your reader feel a bit nervous and unsettled. And then there needs to be a good resolution at the end. So if you kind of look at your genre and you decide what emotion you want your reader to feel, you're on a really good track as to what you're meant to do when you're writing that book.
Actually, I love the word trope because when you're using tropes, you're evoking emotions, and you know the emotions you're evoking in the reader, and it connects us to the reader. And so I love, universally, you need an inciting incident. In a fantasy, you need somebody to be drawn into a strange problem in a strange world. Another thing that's universal across genres is really that midpoint. In Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, we call it the abyss, where it's just, we almost need to strip the protagonist of their ego in a certain sense, because the thing they were afraid of, they have to face it, they have to get into it. And that's true if they're falling in love, or true if they're battling a dragon. I think that's really what connects us to readers, is people are facing their worst fears, they're going after their greatest desires, and that's what makes genre fiction so compelling. And so the thing, I guess, at the end of the day, the thing I love is that genre conventions tie you to your reader. If you have a love triangle, you understand, you know why you read love triangles and keep turning those pages. And so that's also what the reader thinks. And it's really interesting, as we have both been in business, and we've worked in different types of businesses. And one of the most important things in business is to understand your audience, understand the people you are serving through your literature, or whatever it may be. And when you're writing books, it's a little different, because it's not as if with fiction and fantasy and romance, your people are not necessarily the same. You're not serving doctors, you are serving doctors, but they're going to live in different places. They're going to have different professions. But the thing that unites them are these conventions, these thrilling emotions they want to feel, or these magical emotions they want to feel. And so that, personally, I think convention is the best link that you have to understand your readers. How do you feel about your audience? What kind of understanding do you have of your audience?
Well, because I'm published and not self-published, I obviously don't have access to a great big list. So my publishers have that. However, I do have a Facebook group. It's called Miranda Wright's Thriller Readers Facebook group. And I can have a look in that and see the breakdown of who are my fans. And obviously the people in my Facebook group are quite keen on my books. And so I know that the majority of my readers are between 30 and 60, and the majority are female. The largest proportion are in the States. I mean, no great surprise there. And yeah, so that gives me some insight. So it is difficult. You're right, because we are going through channels and we're selling our books. So Amazon has all the information on on the on the purchasers, or any of the bookshops do. I mean, actually, by selling on Amazon, we get more feedback than we would if we go into Barnes and Noble or Waterstones, because then you've got absolutely no idea who's buying your book, because they're probably not going to leave a review. So it is tricky, but I liked what you said when you said, we've both been in business, and actually I see writing as a business. And I'm sorry I'm taking the romance out of it. But it is a business. You've got to understand your product. You've got to understand who your audience is. You've got to understand how to market your book. Even if you're published like I am and you're not self-publishing, you still have to do some marketing. You need to understand, the price points and how much everything is costing. You need to understand the timescales. I'm sorry, I'm going off topic here completely, Emily. But
But
it
this
is
is the
it,
behind the scenes, which is what the book
yeah,
offers. Keep going.
yeah. Well, I've just run out there, so now I've completely gone off at a tangent.
Well, I like what I think the thing that business really brings to it, which is probably our understanding of business, or my understanding of business definitely, is that when someone wants something, when somebody buys anything, if they're going to a lawyer, if they're going to a doctor, they're having certain emotions. And you serve your audience when you understand those emotions, which is why I think genre writing is so successful and why I love working with it, because even if you don't know your readers, which is very hard to do, you're connecting with them through something you have in common, which is the love of thrillers and the love of how you escape. You completely forget the outside world when you are in the suspense of that novel. And I think it's so important to the writing process, because when you understand that, when you know what you're looking for in a book, then you know what to give to your readers. And so understanding your reader in this sense isn't necessarily going to be the Amazon information, only that, as we were just talking about those categories, I can't believe I totally didn't mention those. I actually had a picture of them in my mind. If you go to bestsellers on Amazon, then go to books, then you can see what is selling in these different places, and that's the easiest way to explore. Of course, you can go into a bookstore and do that also, but you kind of have up-to-date information through Amazon of what those readers are reading. And what we really know about them isn't demographics. We know what delights them, what scares them, and what gives them certain emotions. And that's where conventions come in. And so that's really how you understand the market of genre fiction. And so, we've kind of gotten out of the romance. Let's go back into the romance with creativity, because I think within those conventions, within those things that you do you feel that you're still able to be creative? Is it still fun? Is it still interesting?
100%. I mean, I wouldn't be doing it. I'm just starting to plot my 25th psychological thriller.
Oh my goodness,
I mean,
congratulations.
come on, I'm not going to be doing this if it isn't fun and if I don't enjoy it. There are plenty of other things that I can go and do. So no, I don't feel stifled creatively at all. And in fact, I consider myself to be quite a creative person. I do lots of creative pursuits. And I think with genre fiction, it gives me a framework. And actually, when you've got a framework, it's then easier to be creative within it. Because otherwise you're floundering. You're like, okay, well, what on earth am I going to do? So no, I definitely think that genre fiction is great for creativity. I know that some people are worried that certain markets are becoming a bit oversaturated. They're worried that the same storylines are being retold time and time again. But that's happened throughout history. So that doesn't really worry me, because I know that my characters are going to be different, my voice is going to be different, and yeah, that still brings that creativity to the process.
And I think in every single book, it's the element of surprise, which is the biggest creative challenge. We're still falling in love, or we're still being thrilled. And that's where, you have to go above and beyond. where it really requires more creativity of you. I mean, all you need to do is think of the last book where you were genuinely surprised by the ending. And that takes so much invention, so much creativity. Your books happen with very different themes, with very different problems. And so I mean, within any genre, you travel to different countries. Within any genre, you can do it with ghosts, you can do it with monsters. There's so much you can do within a given genre. And so it is, I mean, it's a balance between being able to enter into a certain space where people love certain kinds of adventures, and then you have to make it new in some way. So yes, I'm loving genre. I'm so glad to hear you're on your 25th book. Is there any hint you can give us to what's coming up next? I'm completely
So
putting you on the
yes, I
spot.
have a book coming out on the 4th of December. I think it's the 4th of December, something like that, called The House Swap. So that's all done and dusted and ready to be published. We're just waiting for the final front cover, so I can't share it yet. And number 25, which I'm just starting to plot, and I've got another meeting with my editor tomorrow, gonna have some romance in it. Now that's
Oh,
like that is interesting because typically psychological thrillers tend not to have that much romance in them. But romantic suspense is a big thing at the moment, and I'm going to try it. So we'll see. It may not work. I may not be able to write it, in which case I'll strip it all out. But yeah, I'm going to give it a go. Sort of bring up a few changes and have a little bit of spice in there.
that's lovely. And actually, Make Her Pay, which is at the center of the craft book, we really used that as an example. That has a little romance too. And
Yeah,
so,
but only very
yes,
little. That I'm talking about a love relationship being quite at the center of this book. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It's early days. I've only plotted out the first act. Well, I'm sort of up to the midpoint at the moment. So yeah, early days.
so exciting. And so that kind of brings us to the end. There's always something new to try, even in genre fiction, which is our favorites.
It definitely is.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you.